Secrets of longevity has never been lost. It's just been simply ignored. Today, modern science finally catching up what the ancient wisdom had always known. Today's guest had been dedicated to prove through science that true healing has always been here. I am super excited to have Dr. Douillard on today's show, telling us all about the wisdom and the ancient knowledge that is ready to be rediscovered. So before we start, I'll read your bio. Dr. John Douillard is globally recognized leader of the field of natural health, Ayurveda, and sport medicine. He is the creator of lifespa.com, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Lifespa.com is one of the leading Ayurvedic health and wellness resources on the web, with over 11 million views on the YouTube and over 130,000 newsletter subscribers. Lifespa.com is involved in the way Ayurveda is understood around the world, with thousands of free articles and videos published weekly. Dr. John is the former director of player development for the New Jersey Nets NBA team, author of 7 health books, including his newest Amazon bestseller, Eat Wheat, and host of the Ayurveda Meets Modern Science podcast. He directs LifeSpa Ayurvedic Clinic in Boulder, Colorado. This is really impressive, but you know what really impressed me? Your mission. I have to read the mission. This is where this just resonates. Your mission is transition from culture of expensive and complex healthcare to culture that seeks optimal health through natural mind-body medicine, leaving us more with self-sufficient rather than dependent on medical staff or pill. So again, thank you so much, Dr. John. I don't even know where to start. I have so many things I want to talk about, but maybe the first one for the listeners who are not that familiar with Ayurveda, how does that differ from Western medicine?
Well, just based on the mission statement there, we've created a culture where we have forever medicines, right? When I was a kid, you would get sick. If you did, you would take a medicine, you get better, and then you get off the medicine. And nowadays, you get on the medicine for the rest of your life. And that is a real dramatic shift in how we treat people today. The aim is to just put out the fire, take care of your symptoms, not really address the underlying cause. And that's really what Ayurveda is. Ayurveda is an understanding of how to help the body heal and repair and take care of itself. Naturopathic medicine, for example, is sort of a version of natural medicine and a version of Western medicine where it tries to do the job for the body in a natural way. They'll give you digestive enzymes to do the digesting for you, but they're natural. They'll give you, bioidentical hormones or natural laxatives, all engaged in trying to get the body to do the job for the body. And then, of course, Western medicine is doing the job for you at any cost, save your life, and they're all important. I'm not saying that one is better. It's just that the Ayurvedic approach is to say, how can we get this body back into balance? How can we recognize the upstream underlying cause? How can we bring balance back and then treat that and let the body heal itself so you don't become dependent on a pill or a powder down the road? Or worse, get the body on something like a laxative or an enzyme or a hormone that actually, by definition, is going to tell the body to stop making its own hormones or its own enzymes. And that creates a dependency down the road. And that's something that none of us really want, but we have no choice sometimes. We just feel like I got to digest my food, so I got to take these enzymes. But there's a solution that can actually reboot the upper coordinated effort of stomach acid, bioflow, pancreatic enzymes. All these things can be rebooted naturally, but we just either take the food out of the diet and say it's just bad, like take the wheat, the dairy, the nuts, the seeds, the grains, the gluten, the nightshades, the oxalates, take it all out of the diet because you can't digest it, you feel bad eating it. So of course, got to be the food, without really recognizing that it might be an underlying breakdown of our ability to digest, assimilate, and detoxify. That's the upstream problem. So Ayurveda would let's fix that. And if that doesn't work, sure, let's try a naturopathic approach and get the body, do it for the body naturally the best we can. And if that doesn't work, of course, then you go down the Western medicine route where we're going to do it for you at any cost. And that's sort of like, I think of all the these are like medical buffets where you have an option to eat off of all three when you need them. And they all three make a lot of sense for our long-term health. We need all of them, and they're all really valuable.
Yes, very well said. The Ayurveda in translation is knowledge of life, right? It's not like religion or anything like that. It's pretty much knowledge of life.
What they did thousands of years ago, and this was in China, and all traditional medicines, even Native American medicine, they studied nature. That's all they had. They watched things come out of the ground at certain seasons. They watched things harvest at certain seasons. They watched the seasons change. So they understood, and Ayurveda sort of mapped out the biological clocks that turn on and off at different times of day, and how we need to live in harmony and in sync with that. When to eat, when to exercise, when to think, when to go to bed. All these things were mapped out thousands of years ago, which is really like profound. They knew about the microbiome, which you can't see, but they talked about invisible bacteria that could be good or bad. And they said, don't just kill them, because there are herbs that come out of the ground that are very kind of cytotoxic. They kill things. They said, fix the environment, the ecology, and let the body heal itself. Because there are good bugs and bad bugs and let the good bugs fight the battle for you. It's something we're just beginning to understand. So that's why I love it. They were so prophetic and so profoundly able to understand how the body heals itself, how we live in harmony with nature or disharmony, how to detoxify, how to reboot the digestion, all the things that we don't do today. We just bubble wrap our diet and say, well, don't eat wheat, dairy, nuts, seeds, all these things because they're hard to digest. Nobody's saying, let's go back and fix the digestion so you have a wider berth of foods you can eat. And you might say, well, a lot of the food's toxic. Well, your digestive system is directly linked to your ability to detoxify. So if you can't digest your wheat, your dairy, your nuts, your seeds, your beans, legumes, grains, whatever, nightshades, oxalates, lectins, that means you can't detoxify either. And we have, according to the EPA, 70 million tons of toxic chemicals coming out of our environment, dumped in our environment every year here in America, that filter down into everything we eat, breathe, and drink. So we have to detoxify to stay healthy in this crazy toxic world we live in. And that all depends on strong digestion. So you can basically get a glimpse of how are you detoxifying based on how you're digesting. And if you start taking stuff out of your diet, feel bloated, gas, bloating, constipation, indigestion, all these problems, food intolerances, I can't eat this, can't eat that. Yeah, don't eat it for a while, but let's fix the reason why. And then maybe we can, kind of widen the berth of foods that we can actually digest, assimilate, and utilize.
This is why I so much resonate with your messages, because I don't necessarily look for science. Like Dr. Bruce Lipton says, science is nothing more than defines the terms. It's an art of explanation. So I don't necessarily go into that. I go by my intuition, and intuition always guides me into the common sense, where exactly what you're saying is like, if you start taking things out, eventually you're going to get into the dead end. And I went there one time, actually maybe a couple of times in my life, become completely neurotic. I was only breathing air and drinking water and still got sick. And I was saying to myself, that has to be some other way. This is just not normal and natural. So your approach and your point of view just makes sense. Maybe it's not that most popular, because if somebody really truly understand, okay, what are you saying is I can actually eat bread and drink milk, and not necessarily drink milk, but have dairy and still feel good. I mean, is that even possible? And you saying yes. And I know it's true. You helped me so much. And, it is very hard to find the truth that simple, like you explained, because the truth is always simple. Not easy per se, but it's simple. And, I have 4 books out of your 7 you wrote, and the Eat Wheat, again, maybe not popular out there because everybody's gluten-free now, but they don't realize the gluten-free product is so toxic with all the ingredients they cannot pronounce. And then the other one is like I said, I have 4, but this one, the 3-season diet. When we met in Bahamas, I'm like, well, there's no 3 season, it's 4. So you probably have the same question by many people. But again, I fell in love with it because it brings me back to my upbringing, where we only had what was in season. And so can you talk about that, how important it is to that? And it's all the circadian rhythm as well, which you have wonderful masterclass in your e-course. I took that. I loved it because it just brings you back in where we're supposed to be. So please tell us more about the circadian rhythm and then the season and yeah.
What you said a minute ago was, about science and intuition. And you're right. Traditionally, Ayurveda, they didn't really have science. They just had, I was taught years ago that intuition is nothing more than the extension of logic, which is pretty cool. I love that definition of it. And so when you really study nature for a while, you become intuitive because you can predict in a way what's going to happen. Now, what Ayurveda is a system of medicine that's thousands of years old. And what I ended up stumbling upon, because when I came back from India after my training, I ended up teaching medical doctors, and I had to find science to kind of, teach them this kind of very somewhat intuitive science. So I started writing about the science and the ancient wisdom together. And I kind of feel like that's a great place for folks to know, because if you have science alone, really it can prove whatever it wants. I can give you science, say wheat's good, wheat's bad, soy is good, soy is bad, coffee's good, coffee's bad. Anything you want to prove, you can prove with science. It's not reliable. But if you look at ancient wisdom and you have modern science, I feel like that's a really good place to start. If something stops working, they're probably not going to keep doing it for 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 years. And if you can then find science to back it up, then I feel like it's a good place for us to start. And that's where the circadian rhythms came in. They knew about circadian rhythms. They talked about eating in season, how critical it was that we eat the foods that come out of the ground in season. Now we have science to prove it. We have studies from Stanford that show that the bugs in the soil change from one season to the next. We have other Stanford studies that show that the hunter-gatherer tribes, the Hadza tribe, their bugs in their gut would naturally change from one season to the next because they ate seasonal foods. Now we also have science to show that on the foods that we eat in season, they have what are called bacterial endophytes. Basically, the food you eat that comes out of the ground, your garden, has a microbiome. And that microbiome is critical, not just for us, it's critical for the plant. Just like our microbiome is critical for us, the plants is for them. So it's a relationship, just like in us, between the bugs and the plant. And they're synergistic, and they make a complete package. If we kill all the bugs with insecticides and pesticides, or you take an herb, for example, which has been soaked in alcohol to make it 100 times more potent and make an extract, you sterilized it. It's completely sterile. So many of the supplements people are taking, they're sterile, which means that they might have really good biochemical properties, but they don't have the natural occurring microbiome. And another Stanford study showed that they measured poop in museums of ancient people, mummies really, in New Mexico, in Arizona. And they measured their poop, and they did a microbiome count, and they had so much more diversity in their gut than modern humans when they compared them to modern humans, that they literally called our lack of diversity an extinction event. And part of that is because of the insecticides and the pesticides, all the things we're doing to kill, the bugs. Many of those pesticides and insecticides kill the bugs in our mouth that make the digestive enzymes to help us digest the wheat, the dairy, the nuts, the seeds, the grains, legumes, all that stuff that everybody's saying, I can't eat, right? So it's really, really interesting. So when you go back to saying, what does seasonal eating mean, which is my 3-season diet book, and I did know that there were 4 seasons, but a lot of people think it was stupid. But the reality is there are 3 harvests in nature. There's a spring harvest, which isn't very big. It's very austere. Doesn't have any carbohydrates in it. We have a low-carb harvest, really, and a low-carb time of year if you're eating seasonally. And that would force your body to burn fat and put you into natural ketogenesis in that season. Summertime is a high carbohydrate diet. The end of summer, big time carbs. All the grains and the fruits are being harvested. In fact, the bugs in your gut change to be what are called bacteriades predominantly, which help get starch out of your gut into your bloodstream to store fat, reserve fuel for a winter that's coming. And the actinobacteria are predominant in the spring, which help you get fat as fuel. So our fuel supply was supposed to change from fat in the spring, because there's no carbohydrates being harvested, to starch in the summer. And there's more studies on that, but basically that's the idea. And of course, in the winter time, you have a fall harvest. So you have a summer harvest, you have a spring harvest, and you have a fall harvest for winter eating. And winter in nature is dormant, generally speaking. So in nature, there's always cycles of rest and activity. Active summer, but basically resting winter. So in the winter, it's dormant. So you have three major harvests. You have a fall harvest for winter eating, a spring harvest, and a summer harvest. And those are the three seasons. And so taking that a little further, it's really interesting why the squirrels eat nuts, right? Well, obviously because they're there, but winter is a cold and dry season. And the nuts and the seeds that the squirrels are eating are very oily and very fatty, and they help insulate and antidote the extreme of the winter season. That's why they do it. That's why nature provides it. Nature, this is really important, nature always provides in the harvest the antidote to the extreme of each season. So in the summer, when it's really hot, you get cooling fruits and vegetables, right? In the winter, when it's cold and dry, you get warm nuts and soups and stews and more animal protein. In the springtime, when it's rainy and congested and allergy season, you don't get any carbohydrates, any mucus-making foods. You don't get any pasta or pizza at that time of the year. You get root vegetables. You get an austere harvest. You get calorie restriction. You get a fasting time of the year. You get roots that scrub your villi and help get rid of very astringent, bitter roots that clean the excess mucus out of your body, so you don't get allergies and congestion and mucus. But if you're a body type that has a tendency to have more spring qualities in it, which means you make mucus more easily, like kids make mucus for a living. They're in that spring time of the life. Think of spring as the new year. It's the first part of the year. We're in that time of the life when you're a kid, and they make mucus for a living. So if you feed that mucus-making kid mucus-making food in the mucus-making season of the spring, which is pasta and mac and cheese and everything parents feed their kids in the American diet, you're going to stack all that mucus, and they're going to get colds and asthma and ear tubes and the whole thing, right? So nature had a plan, which was not to give them pasta and pizza because you can't get it in the spring. It was to give them root vegetables and dandelion root tea and austere foods that, like spring greens and things that are going to be very astringent and very bitter and not mucus making. So that's the beauty of it. So I wrote a book called The 3-Season Diet, which was to give people this whole idea. And of course, everybody thought there were 4 seasons, and it didn't change the world like I thought it would, although it's still completely illogical to me why it didn't, because every critter on this planet for millions of years ate this way. And all of a sudden now to tell people to eat this way, no one gets it. It doesn't make it, we should just eat only meat. We should be only, doesn't make any sense. So what I did, I put the grocery list for free on my website. Right when you go to my homepage, you can get this grocery list for winter. Circle the foods on this list that you like and give yourself permission to eat more of those foods. You'll get medicinal doses of the right foods in the right season. We have 3. We have a winter one, a green one for spring, and a red one, orange one for summer. It's that simple. The ones with the asterisks are the superfoods for that season. And you start just doing that. It doesn't mean you have to only eat those foods, but definitely you want to get medicinal dosages of what's in season to inoculate your gut with the right bugs for the right season. We have bugs in the gut coming from the food that boost immunity in the winter, that decongest you in the spring and dissipate heat in the summer. That's the microbiome's role in the foods we eat. And it's supposed to, according to good science, change from season to season. But in America, that doesn't happen because we eat the same food every day.
I feel that what you're saying is if we follow not a gurus, but nature, we'll be on a better path. Because, I live in Florida and I never see oranges in the supermarket from Florida. It puzzles me. So it's like if you start thinking about where the local grocery stores don't have the local necessarily food, they will have it from Chile and they will have it from somewhere else. Like, why we having that? Why don't we just support our own little community? And I think that's what needs to start. But that's a different subject. That's why that happened. But I just talked to last week a girl from the Caribbean islands, and they are still one with nature. They don't have a choice. They have to have that because, like you said, they don't have the abundance of grocery stores to get whatever they want. They really depending on it. And she told me pretty much what you said. I eat this in the spring, I eat this in the summer, and and so on and so forth. And now she lives here, and she says we try to do the same thing as I grew up with, and because it makes sense. And that's what she says. It just makes sense. Why would I eat something that is not in the season? And I think it's all about the convenience and the recipes that people are seeing on a TikTok. But if we go and really see what is in nature, like you said, common sense, like look at the animals. Like I grew up in Eastern Europe, and we didn't have a fish and sea for like all the experts are saying you need a fish oil. I would have an argument because I would say, well, I didn't grow up with it and my ancestors didn't, but we had plenty of walnuts. We had plenty of that. So don't tell me I need a fish oil. I will eat the nuts that the nature supported us with. So you see, it's just like we have to make our own common sense that the nature always provided for us. So I love that. And when we go into the circadian rhythm a little bit deeper, then we go into the night and the day, and then we can enter into the melatonin production that happens in the pineal gland, which to me is so wonderful and magical and so mysterious, because the pineal gland, to me, it's like a bridge between our biology and the environment. And then also the material world with the spiritual, we can go to the next level. But if we stuck with our biology and then the environment, so the pineal gland produces two neurotransmitters, right? The one for the day, the one for the night. The day is the serotonin, the night is the melatonin. So I look at it like more like a picture of something that creates the dark and the white, like the yin and yang, and has to be in balance. So tell us about the melatonin, because it really changed my life. You talked about it in Bahamas, and I remember one of the ladies were saying, my husband has these challenges, blah, blah, blah. And you said, why don't he tried melatonin? And I was so confused. I'm like, isn't that just for sleeping? So of course I had to dig deeper, and I listened to your interview. You have podcast interview with Dr. Paula with Derby. And it was fantastic. Strongly recommend people go listen to this. But tell us about the power of this 3 billion year old molecule.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. It's not a hormone. It's a 3 billion year old molecule, melatonin, that's been around for 3 billion years. It's in every critter that's alive on this planet, plant, food, animal, fish, you name it. They all have melatonin, because on this planet, you kind of have to know when nighttime's coming and when winter's coming. Otherwise, you might be in big trouble. So that's sort of how we evolved, is based on understanding the circadian rhythms. And melatonin is the regulator of the biological clock. So if your biological clocks are out of sync with the circadian rhythms, then you're going to have, well, that's now Nobel Prize winning science, is the understanding of circadian disruption, and how important it is for us to be in harmony. And that means getting bed at the right time, getting more darkness where everything shuts down, having more light. But people don't realize that the more sun you get, particularly in the morning, the more melatonin you produce at night, which is really interesting, that we are circadian beings, and we really need to do the very best we need to act like them. And that means really being there for the sunrise. Every culture around the world until modern culture, they were pretty much there for the sunrise. And most people would revere the sun. It was a sacred event. And now we have really good science to show that red and infrared light that's exclusive in the morning hours, which means that we don't have any UV radiation, any damaging radiation until the shadow that the sun makes on you is shorter than you are tall. So as the sun starts to go up in the sky, your shadow is going to get shorter. As long as the shadow is longer than you are tall, you're looking at mostly red and infrared light. And what that red and infrared light does is like unbelievable. And now, we used to have incandescent light bulbs where you put your finger on it, it would burn your finger. Well, that means that it was producing heat, which means it was producing infrared light. And now we don't have that. They've been legal in America, so you can't use them. So we have a devoid of infrared light in our house, and the average person spends 90% of their time indoors in America. So we have an infrared light deficiency. And that's why those red lights are probably really good, at least in the wintertime when the light is really low. But outside in the winter, you're getting mostly infrared and red light, where the UV radiation is mostly in the southern hemisphere. So it turns out that infrared light activates melatonin at night for you to sleep, but that nighttime melatonin is only 10% of the melatonin that your body makes. And that 10% is the one that regulates your biological clocks and circadian rhythms and your sleep and all that. But research shows that 90% of the melatonin is actually inside of your cell. And what happens inside of your cell is the infrared light activates an enzyme. It's called the cytochrome C oxidase enzyme that activates the production of ATP, or energy, the mitochondrial energy in your cell. But that produces a lot of damage, a lot of free radical damage. Just like if you do nuclear energy, you got problems with waste, right? We have the same problem as a human being. We have to get rid of the waste. So the body, over millions of years, chose to use the sun, the infrared light in the sun, to trigger the production of energy, and that same enzyme produces melatonin inside your cell, locked inside your cell, to swab up the free radical damage from energy production. So the body chose melatonin as its most powerful antioxidant to detoxify and clean up all the free radical damage that causes DNA damage and accelerated aging and all that. So it's sort of like, wow, there's something more to the melatonin picture than just putting you to sleep. So it turns out that the melatonin is so much more than that. When I did my first interview with Dr. Paula Witt-Enterby, who was a melatonin researcher, and when you study Ayurvedic medicine, Ayurveda 101 is learning, the circadian rhythms and the biological clocks and when to eat and what to eat and when all these, how to live in harmony going with the current. So life is not a struggle. You're going downstream. So that, you can't study that without looking down the barrel of melatonin. And that's when I invited Paula Witt to be on my podcast. And she had done research showing that melatonin would reverse osteoporosis and reverse breast cancer. And it showed that not only does it reverse osteoporosis and breast cancer, but there's research, study after study after study that shows it actually reverses so many different cancers. So I had her back on for a second podcast just to talk about the cancer research on melatonin, protection and treatment for breast cancer and colon cancer and prostate cancer, and one after another. And nobody knows that. Everybody thinks it's just a hormone for sleep. And it's not actually officially a hormone, because a hormone, by definition, would suppress the natural production of your own. But melatonin actually encourages your natural production. So as we get older, after you're 50 years old, your melatonin production is going to start to decline inside your cell and the one that regulates your circadian rhythm. Not to mention the light pollution, the cell phones and all that's destroying our circadian rhythms and lowering our melatonin production. We have less melatonin, which means that we have an accelerated aging process because we lose the production of the body's most powerful antioxidant, flat out. So then when I look into the science on these different, chronic degenerative conditions, I find that melatonin works for almost all of them. It's sort of mind-boggling, which is why I had to have her on again and talk about the unsung magic of this molecule, which of course you can buy in the grocery store, which is, that's why your Western doctor will never talk to you about that. But if you just Google PubMed melatonin and whatever condition, cancer, or whatever you want, and read about the science. And I'm not saying it cures cancer. I'm just saying that this is something that can help bring your body back into balance so your body can fight the battle in addition to whatever medical treatment you need. But it's really important to know that that is potentially a powerful adjunct. And what's also neat about melatonin is it doesn't actually have what's called an LD50, which is a lethal dose for half the people who take it, which means you can take enough water to kill half the people. There's an LD50 for water, LD50 for ginger tea, but there's no LD50 for melatonin. They couldn't kill anything with it, which means, again, we're back to it's a 3 billion year old molecule. This body knows what that is. Like, we are very okay with it. And if you take more than you need, it might not work as well. And this is America, right? If it doesn't work, take more. It doesn't, and then when you take more, it doesn't work. I say, I tried melatonin, it doesn't work. Well, there's a lot of research on something called low dose melatonin or microdosing melatonin, where that little bit can be used to actually reset your biological clocks. And I have something we call low dose melatonin, where you take 1 drop, which is just 0.1 milligram, which is, you can't even buy that low of a dose in the grocery store. And you take 1 drop for 5 nights, and then 2 drops for 5 nights, and you keep increasing till you get the precise dose for your individual needs. Then you stay on that dose. And then, because it will encourage your natural production of your own, over time you might have more than you need. You have what you're taking, and now you're making more of your own, which is really what you want, reset function. Then the melatonin might not work as well. And at that point, you take less, not more. And that's the beauty of melatonin. You don't have to take it forever. You can get on, get better, get off, particularly if you're under 50. And if you're over 50 and you want to sort of hack that natural decline in melatonin production, because nature does have a way of getting rid of folks who aren't making babies. That's nature's way, right? That's species survival, sparing the nutrition for the ones who are making babies. So that's one of the degenerative processes that can be hacked by taking a microdose of melatonin. So that's a little bit about what it does. I mean, it's been shown to regulate hormones. It's manufactured in your gut. It's obviously a circadian rhythm balancer. I look at it more than, I don't rarely use it for sleep. I use it to reset biological clocks in sync with circadian rhythms. That's really the magic of it. And once that gets in sync, the body takes care of itself. That's the beauty of it.
What I found fascinating about the interview with Dr. Paula was that we are so trained to have a light when we fall asleep. Like, I know a lot of families that they would leave little light on for the children or themselves when they go to sleep. And now we go even to our hotel rooms or our homes, and they have all these plugins and things that has light everywhere. And she was saying that even a little light can disturb the production of melatonin. That was mind-boggling how sensitive that is. And what I think, it's not necessarily to your eyes, it's actually the third eye. The third eye sees the light because your eyes are closed. So it is just, again, so wonderful that somebody's bringing that to the forefront. Because, again, when I see the pineal gland as the bridge between those two worlds, and then you have the yin and yang symbols, like they have to be in balance, because if you do not have enough melatonin, you're not going to be producing a lot of serotonin either. Correct? I mean, it's kind of goes together because you're not going to have a good night's sleep or whatever that is.
No, it's very true. And, there was a study done where even the light coming under a door, the crack underneath the door, was enough to lower melatonin production. As when the next night they came in and they didn't have the light under the door, melatonin levels were significantly higher. So it doesn't take a lot of light. All the little indicators all over our bedroom and house, and there's the little, they're just everywhere.
Yeah, when I go to a hotel, I have a duct tape and I just put stuff over it because I can't sleep. I'm that sensitive. So again, it was my intuition telling me, like, yes, you need to have it dark. So I'm encouraging the listeners to really start paying attention. Are you sleeping with the light on? Because that could disturb, your circadian rhythm and you don't even realize it. Well, the next subject, which goes still to the ancient wisdom, and a lot of people talk about it now, but I feel like you were one of the pioneers in it, and that was breath. And, I have your book here. This was one of, I got this book, I think like 15 years ago. And I lived right next to you, really, and I didn't even know it. And you have here forwarded by Billie Jean King and Martina Navratilova, who comes from the same country as me. So you were talking back then, like a long time ago, about the importance of nose breathing. And I don't have problem with that aspect, but I know so many people do. Tell us about what is it about the importance of nose breathing?
Well, first of all, when you breathe through your nose, you're more likely to use your diaphragm. And most people don't realize it, that the diaphragm is way more than a breathing muscle. And most people don't have a functional one. A recent research with athletes, elite athletes, 91% of them did not have a diaphragm relaxing and contracting fully. So like none of us do, because we're always sitting on the way to yoga, on the way back from yoga, sitting and eating, sitting in front of your computer, sitting on the couch. And whenever you sit, we sort of slouch forward, and that rib cage drives your diaphragm into a downward pre-contracted position, which means it can't fully contract or fully relax. And the rib cage's job is to squeeze air out. And the only reason why the rib cage would open up is because the diaphragm contracts, sucks air in, and it inflates it. So most of us, all of us really need to do work for the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is so critical because not only is it a breathing muscle, it's the number one pump of the body's lymphatic system, right? So that's huge because your lymphatic system is trying to carry your immune system, detoxify your cells, and deliver fat as baseline energy to every cell of your body. So if you're tired or you have an immune compromised issue or an oversensitive immune response, or food intolerances are, by the way, an immune response, or you have, toxicity issues, which means you're holding on to water, you're swelling, you're bloated, you're got headaches and toxins and skin issues and joint pain, and all these things are the body not getting the trash out as well as it could. And Ayurveda said, you know what, the first thing we should evaluate in somebody is how well they get the trash out. Because we know when your toilets can't flush or your bathroom can't drain, you can't use the faucets, and that's the blood and the nutrition coming in. You better make sure the drains coming out is good, otherwise you're not going to use anything. And that is a logical way to treat the body, evaluate how well the body's moving the trash. Now, not just intestinal trash, but lymphatic drainage. And your breath is a powerful detoxifier as well. And most people, 91% of athletes, aren't breathing properly. Studies show, at least 15 of them. And this is like, you go to the doctor for heartburn. Do you think they're going to tell you that you can breathe away your heartburn and give you a breathing exercise? There's 15 studies in their medical journal saying it can reverse their heartburn, GERD, reflux, and indigestion. Their studies show that it will lower their blood pressure in 3 minutes as well as Western medication. The diaphragm is the pump for the cerebral spinal fluid that washes the brain's lymphatic and glymphatic systems to the tune of 3 pounds of trash and plaque per year. And studies show if that diaphragm is not working and that pump's not working, then you're more vulnerable to congestion of the brain's lymphatic system, where the master computer doesn't have really good feedback from what the body's trying to tell it. And it's linked now to anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, inflammation, infection, autoimmunity, and poor sleep. So the diaphragm is directly linked to that functional digestion below it, but it's also linked to pumping the brain's lymphatic system and trash out. And if this gets congested, well, that's when long haul COVID was first discovered. The studies showed it was directly linked to congestion of the brain's lymphatic system, which is pumped by your diaphragm. And in COVID, you can't breathe. So you lose that pump and you can't get the trash out. And that's linked to all types of health concerns, as I just mentioned. So the diaphragm the list of what it goes on and goes on. And when I wrote my first book, Body, Mind, Sport, that you have from way back when, early 1994, I think it came out or something. I think that's the UK version, as you're looking at there from the UK.
That
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's from the UK. It's a little bit of a different color. So anyway, we did studies comparing nose breathing with mouth breathing during exercise. And normally when people exercise, they're breathing through their mouth and they're triggering a fight or flight response. Because if you breathe through your mouth and you see a bear in the woods, you're going to take that kind of breath. And that's what people do. So the brain waves showed major stress patterns. Then we had to come back and do the same exercise with their mouth closed. And they did the same workout, but now their brain, instead of going to a fight or flight beta state in the brain, beta waves in the brain went into a meditative calm. The brain went into a meditative alpha state, a coherent state, and a dramatically less fight or flight state. We measured their breath rates, and when they were breathing through their mouth, they were breathing at 48 breaths per minute. When they came back the next day, did the same workout with their nose breathing, they were breathing at 14 breaths per minute versus 48 breaths per minute. When we asked them, how did you guys feel during this workout? And it was 200 watts of resistance on an exercise bike, which is pretty vigorous. If you try it out, you'll, okay, that's a lot. And their perception when their mouth was open was a 10 out of 10. When their mouth were closed and they breathed through the nose, their perception of the same workout was a 4 out of 10. So I was really searching for the runner's high because I learned this when I went to India because I was training for an Ironman triathlon years ago in the early 1980s. And I went for my first Ayurvedic lecture and was interested in what they were saying. I went up to him and said, I'm training for an Ironman. What do you think about doing that with Ayurveda, yoga, meditation? And he looked at me and he asked me, what is it? And I told him what it was. And he goes, like, why do you do that? And I said, I didn't really have an answer. I didn't know. And he said, well, do you meditate? And I said, yeah, I do meditate. And he goes, do you sleep when you meditate? And I said, deeply. I get this really deep sleep. And then he looked at me again like I was sort of an idiot and said, meditation is not sleep. He goes, meditation is a state of being alert and resting at the same time. It's the combination of activity and silence at the same time. It's a law of nature. It's like a solar system or a galaxy or electrons spinning around a nucleus or a hurricane. The bigger the eye, the more powerful the winds. These are laws of nature. And I was like, oh, and he looked at me and he said, you're exhausted. I said, but what if I was able to, not sleep in meditation? Would all this exercise be okay? And he said, yeah, you can. Next, he was just trying to get rid of me. But I started going to meditation weekend, like once a month. I go on a weekend meditation retreat in LA when it was like, you could do that. And we were in those early days. And then I went for a 2-week meditation retreat. And I came back from that and I went into a 3-month runner's high zone experience where I started competing at a significantly higher level, started winning medals, competing very competitively compared to what I was doing. A lot of my friends thought I was on steroids. A lot of them learned to meditate. And not only did I have this runner's high for 3 months in my competitive training, I was training dramatically less, meditating more, but it rolled over into my clinical internship. I had a level of academic bandwidth that I never experienced before. Like I was in the zone where, like you say, my best race is my easiest race, or, do less and accomplish more, and do nothing and accomplish everything are kind of Ayurvedic sayings. And I was like, I was in that state. And then it disappeared. And I was like, I really want to figure out what that was. So when I ended up going to India in 1986 and stayed there, went there for like a 6-week vacation to learn Ayurveda, I ended up staying there for a year and a half. And that's where I met Deepak Chopra, came back, ran his center for 8 years. But that's where I started doing the research on the nose breathing versus the mouth breathing. We proved that we can experience that runner's high, that best race is my easiest experience. Not only when you're running, it was the whole point of this was in life. The 3-season diet was like that other book was like, how do we live in harmony going downstream so you feel like you're going with the current, not against the current. Our culture is against the current. Most of us feel like life's a struggle. Yeah. And the Body, Mind, Sport book was really about, let's take this breathing, use the exercise as a model for the stress of your life so you can slowly create that calm and slowly build the winds around that storm so you can ultimately be a fully mature hurricane with the ability to be dynamically active in your life and yet functioning from that inner kind of eye of the storm, that composure and calm. You're not out there in the winds of the storm feeling like life is such a massive struggle. And that's the beauty of it. With Ayurveda, it wasn't like, okay, like people think yoga is like meditate, okay, don't do anything, just be really, just baby yourself and just meditate all day long and be really calm. No, Ayurveda was like full human potential, but the full potential in nature comes from a powerful eye of the storm that supports more productivity in your life. And that's the key of to me, what Ayurveda was. It was like a, lifestyle, diet, exercise, routine, but also activating your functional diaphragm to create neurological calm that you can then take that calm, and reinforce it with meditation and yoga and breathing for sure. But the idea was, we're not have to bubble wrap our diet, we don't have to bubble wrap our lifestyle. We have the ability to be fully dynamically active. But if you're not hailing from that composure and calm, you're going to be in the winds of the storm, and the stress will take you out over time. No question about that. But if you're functioning from the silence, you're invincible. You're not affected by the wear and the tear the way we would when you're dodging refrigerators in the eye of the storm.
Yeah. Once again, you have completely different perspective on that. And the transformational awareness technique that you teach in your e-course, wonderful way. If anyone is interested in what you're saying, I would strongly recommend, easy to follow. And it is exactly what you're saying. You don't have to sit crisscross opposites in meditation and to constantly just be in meditative space. It's like you said, how can I bring this into daily life and be in the optimal level? Love this course, strongly recommend this. So we both have girls, and there's this really alarming movement in a younger and younger generation, and that is the vanity, the beauty industry, specifically the Botox. And I heard you on a podcast talking about it. Can you please share your take on it from the Ayurvedic point of view?
Yeah, I wrote an article about that in my website. The issue with Botox, first of all, it's a really powerful toxin. And what happens is, you take it when you're young and, it doesn't seem to make a big deal. But what happens is that the downside is there are side effects. And the more that you do it, the more likely you are to experience those side effects. And those toxins can actually spill over into other areas and other tissues of the body, creating facial paralysis and vocal paralysis. It's not like it's just like, oh, this is great. This is like the newest, greatest thing. It isn't. It definitely has issues. And generally speaking, we don't find out the real problems until many, many years, even decades later. And that's where I kind of feel like, you're really just playing with fire. You don't really know. And I wrote an article really evaluating the immediate and the long-term side effects of which we know now. And they're significant enough, if you read the article, to say, you know what, I don't want to put that in my body. Definitely not my face, which is close to my brain, and all my senses and all these really vital organs. It doesn't make any sense at all. And there are Ayurvedic alternatives. There are herbs that naturally build collagen. I think living a lifestyle, keeping you have skin on the inside and you have skin on the outside. This is the skin on the outside. But the skin on the inside is what makes the skin on the outside functional. And in Ayurveda, they were all like, the most 85% of all disease comes from digestion, which is about the ecology, the quality of the skin on the inside to support a healthy microbiome, which does naturally change from season to season to season. And some of those herbs that are harvested, like amalaki and turmeric, they're natural collagen precursors. Brahmi with Centella asiatica. These herbs are natural agents for the skin. We actually have a skincare line I developed many years ago with all these natural collagen precursors in them because they were the old ancient Ayurvedic longevity, skincare, beauty secrets. And so this is, to me, is like illogical to me to put a toxic chemical into your skin when if you just look at this as a reflection of your overall health and the quality of your skin on the inside. And the inside skin is your intestinal skin, your respiratory skin, and the skin that lines your arteries. Officially, it's called epithelium, but this is epithelium as well. Just taking your intestinal, this skin, and turning it inside out is the lining of your intestinal tract, basically. So it's the same stuff, and it responds to the same nutrients. And that means good, healthy, quality digestion and getting the natural, collagen precursors that nature provides in season. And that's, what I've done for many, many years, and really blessed that I learned Ayurveda so long ago, because I think it's really staved off so many of the age-related degenerative concerns. Because, both my wife and I, she's the same way. She doesn't have any wrinkles. I don't really have any wrinkles. She's 66 or something like that. I'm 69, and, I look around and I go, the American lifestyle doesn't work well in their 60s and pushing 70. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I'm not aging. I am aging, and it's natural and hopefully graceful, and it's all good. But, I think we have what I call accelerating aging factors in our culture. And Ayurveda they have a branch of their system, which is one of the 8 branches of Ayurveda, is for longevity. Literally, they had a whole branch for longevity 5,000 years ago. And they talked about, and it was called rasayana, which is the study of rasa. And rasa is your lymphatic system. So that's your diaphragm, pumping. And the lymphatic system comes from, I'll tell you where the lymph system starts, which is the largest circulatory system in your body. And the study of that was the study of longevity in Ayurveda. So there's something about that we should all know about. Western medicine has basically no medical application of treating your lymphatic system. It just doesn't exist unless you have cancer. They take lymph nodes out. Still to this day. Yet, in their medical journals, there are studies after studies after study about the lymph in the brain. I mean, there's so much research, but not in medical practice. Where in Ayurveda, the lymphatic system is the key system for longevity. And studies show that when you don't break down your protein and your fat the way you were designed, like wheat or dairy or nuts or seeds or grains or even greasy fried food for that matter, which is really just a version of the environmental toxins from the atmosphere that we put in from industry that are fat soluble, which the liver and gallbladder have to break down. But if you don't break the fats and the proteins down properly, they will go, this is a quote from the medical journal, they'll get into your intestinal tract, they'll be too big to get into your blood and nourish you, they'll get uptaken into what are called the lacteals, which is like the garbage can of your intestinal tract. It's the beginning of your lymphatic system. And the lion's share of the lymph in your body is around your belly. So when you get extra weight around your belly, that's congestion of your lymph. That's your gut-associated lymph, which is responsible for gut immunity, which is 70% of your immune response. And from there, it goes into skin-associated lymph, which makes your skin not feel great or look great. It goes into your brain-associated lymph, which is the 3 pounds of trash that's trying to take out of your body. And that creates a host of problems. It builds up in your joints, you become arthritic. All these things happen that don't have to happen if you just reboot your digestive system and really refine your microbiome and reboot that the way nature had designed. But that's where the lymph comes from, is from your digestion. And the study of that process is the study of longevity. And, it's also going to make you feel good when you're healthy as you age.
Makes total sense. And it started also when people doing surgeries on their face, they don't realize there's thousands of little lymphs they cutting into. And once you cut one lymph, it's like, where's this trash going to go? So it starts creating a domino effect. It definitely needs a little bit more research and evidence what the side effects truly are. I personally use your oils, your facial line, love it, probably for the last 8 years. I just like the whole oils. I don't know why, but anyway, love your line. Overall, your products comes with such an integrity and consistency of quality that I really appreciate what you're offering to the public. When we come into the end of our show, when I watched your 28-day Ayurveda challenge. I really enjoyed it. And in the end of it, you had beautiful ending. And I would like to end our show with what you had said. You said something about Ayurveda is really designed to take the heaviness away. And can you continue on that, like what Ayurveda actually is, if you know where I'm going with this?
You know, the body becomes dense. And the density is not just physical density, toxins, heavy metals, environmental pollutants. It's really dense on the subtle level. Taking this kind of a little bit deeper, Ayurveda described the cause of disease as the mistake of the intellect, where this crazy mind of ours and body starts to think of itself as separate from the underlying quantum fields that we come from. We now know, right? There's quantum fields, they become matter, the matter becomes us, right? We all know that. That's well-documented science. Ayurveda said that that field is in fact our consciousness. So when that consciousness becomes matter, or that field becomes our physiology, and our physiology gets so dense that it doesn't recognize itself as part of the field, starts to function as independent of the field, that's the cause of disease. So Ayurveda was like the way to treat the body at the most fundamental level. Of course, digestion is right up there, and fundamental, and stress, and all these things matter, but they're after the body has forgotten and lost the memory of itself as part of that field. Well, that's the purpose of Ayurveda, is to restore the memory of pure consciousness into the cell of the body and remove the density of the physical body, the heaviness of the physical body, so it becomes more light. And light isn't just a word that we just throw around. The body actually releases photons, which are particles of light, out of our DNA, thousands per minute. And those DNA particles, most of them are incoherent and damaging because of DNA damage. That's well scienced. It's hard, and they're called ultra-weak photon emissions. But when they become more coherent, and the science shows if you do yoga and breathe and meditate, live in harmony with nature, not all stressed out doing this all day, go, 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 but still your nervous system, create the eye of the storm, the photon emissions become coherent. And when they become coherent, they carry information. All science well studied. Photons, particles of light, carry your thoughts. They carry information throughout the body. And they don't just stop where they go through us because they're photons. They don't just stop when they hit us. They go right through us. But they carry information within us. This is like wild. And they also can studies show, this is emerging science, but there's studies show that they can carry your intention. So these photons can carry information and intention, and because they don't just stop within our body, they can be carried at great distances. So it all of a sudden starts to explain why prayer. How does prayer work? There's so many studies showing that prayer works. It's hard to ignore the science on prayer. But sometimes it doesn't work. But a lot of times it does work. Well, maybe the mechanism is because if you're praying and you're not creating a deep enough calm where the photon emissions are coherent and therefore coherent enough to carry the information, carry the intention, then the prayer doesn't work so well. But if you actually have that photon emissions to become, they can carry information at great distances. And that's something called distance healing or prayer. And it's been around for thousands of years in India, and most cultures in the world have some type of recognition of distance healing. And now we have a mechanism for that. Well, it goes beyond that. If you're going to try to restore the memory of consciousness from field to physiology, where your physiology forgot that it's for field, you'd probably want to put your awareness right where the field became physiology, at the junction point, the gap. Like if you put a lamp in a doorway, you have light shining in both rooms. We want the field and the physiology to get the light and restore memory, right? That's the plan. So it turns out that that's what photons are. They're particles of light and they're frequencies of light. So if you put your attention right at the junction point, you can have something that functions both as a particle and a field. And according to the science, when they become more particle-based in your body, they become more dense, heavy, like you said. And that's where those cells have lost the memory of pure consciousness. So what Ayurveda created was what are called junction point or gap therapies. They were all about the gaps between sunrise and sunset, the gaps between the equinox and the solstices, the gap between the thoughts, the gap between the breath, holding your breath retention. All these things weren't just sort of like weird random thoughts. They were all specifically designed to put the body's attention at the gap between field and physiology or consciousness and matter. And then you bring in what's called quantum entanglement. Einstein termed that phrase spooky action at a distance, because quantum entanglement is when I take a photon of light that's, say, in my computer, and because it's in my computer or in my body, it's entangled with all the photons in my body. But some of those are blasting out of my body, and they could go into the next galaxy. But if I were to observe that photon in my body, it would instantaneously change the spin of that photon that's entangled in the Andromeda galaxy, instantaneously, faster than the speed of light. That's why Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. He didn't want to go there because it kind of blew up his whole plan. But now we have science to show that quantum entanglement is a thing. And that's what quantum computing is all about in our world today. And the future of cybersecurity would be you're in your computer, one of those photons blasts away, some hacker's trying to hack into your computer, and as soon as they observe their computer, instantaneously I'll get a notation in my computer, because as soon as they try to observe an entangled particle, the change of the spin of my particle, my computer will set an alert, shut it down. And literally that is the future of quantum computing. It's happening. In the next 10 years, it'll be how quantum computing is actually sold and quantum cybersecurity is actually taken care of. Well, that's the mechanism how it works Ayurvedically. This is like what I love about Ayurveda. They were like so ahead of their time, because they're saying, okay, what if I were to observe these photons emissions at the junction point between consciousness and matter when they're actually in a field state, a frequency state, that would instantaneously change the spin of the photons that had become particulate in my body that lost their way. And through quantum entanglement, observing the photons in a frequency kind of field state, it'll instantaneously restore the memory of field or frequency or consciousness into the physical body. And that's the fundamental definition and description from the modern science perspective of how Ayurveda talked about how to heal the body at the most fundamental level. Like you so simply said, get rid of the heaviness. And that's exactly what they do. So that's what I love about it. It's just so incredibly profound.
Thank you. That is definitely so deep, because I feel the Ayurvedic system, it is deep. You can just go as deep as you want. And like you were saying, just to summarize, we covered so much today, and I cannot appreciate you enough for what we covered. We covered the circadian rhythm, the breath, the melatonin, all the other things. And what I was getting out of your 28 days Ayurvedic challenge was that when you are getting rid of the heaviness, you allow the body to finally become lighter. And like you said, the light is connected to the information of the truth of who we are, the conscious, kind individuals that carry then compassion towards the other human beings around us. So that is what I'm getting out of what you do, to sharing that message with everyone. And they can find your website. I love your name because it's so easy to remember, lifespa.com. Is there anything else you want to share that where else people can find you, or what you're offering right now?
Yeah, lifespa.com is where it's at. And we have about 1,500 articles now on ancient wisdom and modern science, where you can just search up your health concern and kind of get all that information is for free. So it's a real great library of really, I think really cool ancient wisdom, really translated into English for folks, but with all the science. That's kind of what we do. And of course, you can sign up for our newsletter and get that information on a weekly basis. And because I'm constantly writing more articles about the combination of the two. And of course, we have an Ayurvedic store where I have formulated products over, I've been doing this for 41 years now. So over many, many years, been formulating products for my patients. And that's why I know they work, because, if you have patients and you give them something that doesn't work, you find out pretty quick. So that's what's really neat about having, Ayurvedic formulations, done by a practitioner who's actually, on the front lines, which is, I think, really important. And then, of course, I'm on all the social channels. You can follow me there as well. But that's it. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Douillard. And again, thank you for your time and all the wisdom you have shared with us. Thank you for joining us today. I hope our conversation today had inspired you to connect with the ancient wisdom and your intuition. Please subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. This is Dr. Lenka Schulze, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.